Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. I mentioned to an older coworker that I had recently made a Reddit account. He read my previous posts, laughing, and then asked me to tell a story from back in the 90s. The story was good, so I agreed. I typed this out as he told it to me. So just think of it as him and not me. However, since I'm hearing this secondhand, I have no way to prove any of this is true, so please keep that in mind. Told by my coworker, my great-uncle used to own a fairly fancy country club-style restaurant lodge. The kind that was a little hard to find in the days before global positioning systems, but so worth it because there was reserved dining, a place to park recreational vehicles for night stays, and even places to play poker. He even had Dungeons and Dragons groups coming in from time to time. About 30 years ago, when he still owned the business, he hired a man I'll call Crane. Crane was a rail-thin, balding man with a comb-over, a big pointy nose, and a very well-groomed mustache. My uncle hired him because Crane seemingly had an excellent resume and lots of experience working in high-class restaurants. Crane also claimed to have been active in multiple Civil War reenactments, in which he always played a Confederate. For context, we lived in the northern United States. Because of where the lodge was located, Crane was allowed to live on-site in a recreational vehicle he'd brought with him since he had nowhere else to go. My great-uncle had allowed employees to live on-site before, when he hired people who were down on their luck, and it helped them to start over. Crane was a self-described city man, so why he ended up out in the boonies with a recreational vehicle was anyone's guess. But people usually only moved out to places like that if they wanted to disappear. Crane generally rubbed me the wrong way, and only acknowledged me because I was related to my great-uncle. At the time, I was working there washing dishes and waiting tables. Crane looked at me and most other employees like we were beneath him with squinting eyes and a raised nose. Until then, I thought I only saw people like him in cartoons. But this guy was every fancy stereotype you can imagine, right down to the penguin tuxedo he insisted on wearing. The only time I've ever worn a tuxedo was to my own wedding, and it was rented. Crane seemingly put up a good front and went the extra mile for the customers he liked. He was a complete jerk to those he didn't. After a couple of months, complaints had been coming in about Crane turning people away at the door and even pretending to have lost reservations. And the people he did this to the most were people who were not white. He didn't get away with it very much, though, as a call for the manager or my great-uncle often cowed him. But he refused to stop either. I wish I had greater detail on this, but it was 30 years ago. Eventually, my great-uncle got into a big altercation with Crane over turning away customers and Crane's attitude. The man doubled down and acted as though he were right about everything. He also used many offensive terms to describe people. My great-uncle was ready to fire Crane on the spot, but the man quit before anyone could say anything else. He actually threw a cloth napkin on the floor and yelled that he was once again being discriminated against for his beliefs, and that his rights as a man weren't being met. Then he stormed out the door yelling that no one understands him anymore, and he'd be moving back south, where people would agree with him. Then he took off in his recreational vehicle. No one I know has seen or heard from Crane since, but I feel like he's exactly the type of person who'd claim to be a sovereign citizen, if you get my meaning. My great-uncle sold the lodge and retired about 15 years later. He passed away at the ripe old age of 88. The lodge eventually went out of business under the new owners and was repurposed into a private estate. This happened a couple of days ago, so I'll do my best to recall the conversation exactly as it went, but some parts may be paraphrased. Also, I apologize for the formatting as I am on mobile. For context, I work nights at a gas station. About a week ago, a couple of kids, probably no more than 15 to 16 years old, who are semi-regulars. I've seen them a few times before, but not often enough to know them, came in around 2 a.m. and ran off with about $30 worth of drinks and snacks. Since I'm not allowed to chase shoplifters, I followed protocol and left a note for my boss so she could review the tapes and post their pictures, allowing us to inform them they are banned if they ever come back. You wouldn't believe how many thieves are, in fact, foolish enough to return. These two in particular were especially clueless. 2 days ago, I was working my only weekly day shift, and who should walk in but my pair of thieves? And who did they have with them? One of their mothers. I immediately buckle down and tell them they need to leave. The following is how the conversation went. The mother will be referred to as Karen, boy 1 as B1, boy 2 as B2, and awesome manager, who is truly the best, as AM. I will be referred to as me. The two thieves walk in. Me. You two need to go right now, B1. For what, B2? We didn't even do anything. Me. You know exactly what you did and you're banned from the store. You can leave on your own feet or with a police escort. You choose. They leave and go back to the car waiting for them at the pump. From the window I can see them talking to the woman in the driver's seat, gesturing and pointing. She gets out of her car and storms into the store. Karen, why on earth did you tell my son and his friend they can't be here? Me. Ma'am, they ran out with nearly $30 in products. We do not allow theft, and they are banned from the store. You are welcome to come and get what they need, but if they're seen on the property, the police will be called. Karen. No, my son is not a thief. How dare you get me a manager? Me. Gladly. She doesn't know my manager has even less patience for customer nonsense than I do. Since the store isn't very big, she's already heard this exchange from the office. I bring her out, and she says exactly what I did. Karen. That's a bold-faced lie. My son is a good boy. You're targeting him and his friends for no reason. AM. You're welcome to come back and watch the tape for yourself. Karen says she'll do just that. Karen. And once I have proof you're lying, I'll be expecting this little insult to be fired. AM brings Karen into the office and I accompany them. Being the assistant, it's both part of my job and a joyful experience to watch Karen's face fall when she finds out her good boy is a thief. AM plays the tape, and Karen's son and his friend are clearly identifiable, as their only means of a disguise was their school track hoodies pulled up over their hair. Folks, they had their names on the back. They were wearing the hoodies as they stayed in the car waiting. Karen was too stunned to speak at first, but eventually remembered how to be confrontational and stormed out, shrieking that she'd be calling corporate. For what, who knows, but she's calling anyway. I'm a recent medical graduate. In my country, we do 1 year of social service, unsupervised medical work, before we get our title. I performed my social service giving free consults in a government facility that offers many services, plus free physiotherapy, nutritional, dental and medical consults, family medicine. They had a bit of a chaotic situation there. So long story short, we had 2 doctors' offices. I was instructed to only see patients with a medical file in this institution, and the other, older doctor was only going to see people with no medical file in the institution. The other doctor, let's call him Phil, has a government worker contract, and I had a social service one. They know him from decades, and I am new. He can screw me easily if he wants to, important later. And we can get surprise inspections by the Secretariat of Health. So my work ethic was do your job quietly, get no complaints, don't get into trouble. All documentation has to be perfect. At the beginning, I had to consult with him to ease me into that system, and we didn't get along well, because he is proud, but very out of date, so we bumped heads. Example, I refused to issue antibiotic prescriptions with my name and signature for throat infections that were clearly viral. He didn't like my insubordination. I got my own office a bit later, and the patients with files all knew they were meant to see me exclusively, although some continued to see Dr. Phil. The thing is, if they have a file, we need to adhere to strict laws. Every file needs signed informed consent, a note for every consult signed by the patients, copies of the labs, etc. Phil wasn't supposed to see patients with files, so he never wrote up notes or did any documentation, as an important number of his patients would not come for follow-ups, and creating a whole file and medical history was not necessary. Eventually, I start getting nurses and DRs from the outside coming in to look at my files and asking about specific patients. Turns out Phil was seeing patients with files, disagreeing with my treatments, and reporting me for them, which ended with investigations being made. I never got into any trouble because I could prove with guidelines that I was issuing correct treatments. Phil never wrote a consult note, so not only did he not have any documentation to prove his point, he was widely advertising he was seeing patients with files, not requesting those files, and failing to document the consults. So he got into a lot of trouble for his misadventures. Sadly, he just couldn't stop himself. He kept reporting me every 2 to 3 weeks, and eventually he got a scolding by the regional boss, and was told he was no longer allowed to see patients with files without my supervision. One day he crossed the line. Keeping adult files is important enough, but pediatric patients' files are a tier above that. If a parent complains about inappropriate behavior by the doctor, and you didn't do a consult note where the parent signs a consent form and signs the note, you have nothing to protect you. Documentation is all we have. I had an 8-year-old patient, I'll call him Lewis, in the spectrum, who, due to a congenital condition, had a kidney removed, and the remaining one wasn't firing on all cylinders. So dosing medicines correctly is important, as his body may clear them slowly, and he could build doses to toxic levels quickly. One day I learned Dr. Phil saw Lewis due to an infection about 10 days prior, never told me, didn't add a note to the file, didn't get signed consent to provide attention and do a medical examination, and naturally never had the brilliant idea to open the file, as those are inside my office, and he arrives 2 hours later than me and leaves 2 hours earlier than me, because he can without consequences, etc. So I know he couldn't possibly have taken the file without me noticing, and it has no note from him. So I go to see him in private, talk to him, tell him doing that can put a life in risk in a calm and polite manner, as I still knew if I escalated it I could still get the shorter end of the stick because of how protected he is, and I go back to my office for my next consult. Then poop hit the fan. So I was in the middle of the consult, a woman and her young son, when Phil comes in without knocking and starts berating me in front of the patients for being disrespectful to a senior doctor of this institution, etc., etc. You get the idea. I was furious. The moment he was done, I reminded him, in front of the patients, that I scolded him for seeing a patient with a file when he was strictly forbidden from doing so by the regional chief unless he was under my direct supervision, how he failed to request the patient's file, a patient with a chronic kidney disease, which he didn't do proper due diligence on to make sure he didn't write a potentially fatal prescription to, putting a life in risk, etc. I laid it on him like a ton of bricks, and made sure to spread it like fine Nutella on every corner of his pride. Luckily, there was a nurse in the office, so she served as a witness in case anything happened. The mom of my patient was kind enough to offer me her details on her own accord, in case I needed another witness. A wondrous hero Phil decided he wouldn't have it, and reported me that same day due to my conduct. So he forced the opening of an investigation involving another consult he didn't document. It did not have a happy ending for him. The bit about the consult being about a pediatric patient with chronic kidney disease he didn't request a file for made it worse for him. I then learned the word of that got out. Our regional boss oversees 1/4 of the city, so the monthly staff meetings gather a lot of people, and my nurse witness wasn't about to let that incident remain as contained gossip. She can't stand Phil either. I would love to end in this story with fireworks and justice being served, and yet somehow, my dear readers, Phil kept his job and got nothing more than what the regional chief assured me was a very hard slap on the wrist. At the very least, Phil is now a far cry from the grandiloquent fastidious, puffy-chested, eyes closed while waving his index dismissively, little sphincter of an antibiotics for viruses prescribing swollen little ego that he used to be, and the world is a slightly happier place for it. I am thankfully done with my social service, and will never have to deal with this two-legged menace ever again. And you won't believe the crazy situation I got into when I was visiting my sister's place. So, here's the deal. My sister lives in this kinda sketchy neighborhood, and I had to park my minivan out on the street. I totally forgot to lock it, and that turned out to be a big mistake. I had a pretty normal day at my sister's, catching up, having a good time, and all that jazz. But when it was time to head home, I walked back to my minivan, and my heart just about jumped out of my chest. There's this lady sitting in the driver's seat, and she looked like the living embodiment of the infamous Karen. I'm like, "What the heck are you doing in my car?" She looks at me all surprised, but not really sorry, and says, "Oh, I saw the car was open, and I just needed a place to change and chill for a bit." I'm standing there with my jaw on the ground like, "Are you serious? This is my car, lady." She's looking all calm, unfazed, and says, "Yeah, well, you should lock your car, Now, I'm not one to usually lose my cool, but this lady had just invaded my personal space like it was no big deal. I'm still trying to process this, but then I catch a whiff of something sweet, and I remember, I had a brand new bottle of fancy perfume in my glove box. I knew it was there when I parked the van. But guess what? I opened the glove box and the perfume is nowhere in sight. I'm like, "Lady, you've got some explaining to do. Where's my perfume?" She tries to act all innocent, but her nervousness is starting to show. "Perfume? I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not buying it." I tell her, "You've been in here for who knows how long and my perfume magically disappears. You've got some explaining to do." So I decide it's time to get the law involved. I pull out my phone, dial 911, and within what feels like record time the cops show up. I'm explaining the whole crazy situation to them, and they're giving me those, "Seriously a Karen?" looks. But they go over to her, and after some back and forth, they pull her out of my van, slap on the cuffs, and start reading her rights. It was wild. She's screaming, "This is ridiculous. I didn't steal anything. You people are crazy." The cops are like, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for breaking and entering." And that's how this whole fiasco went down. I never thought I'd have to call the cops on someone for trying to steal my perfume, but here we are. Turns out, this Karen had quite the rap sheet. She'd been in trouble with the law for all sorts of petty crimes before. I guess this was just another one to add to her list. The whole thing left me feeling both relieved and kinda baffled. Who breaks into a car just to use it as a personal changing room and chills spot? Karen, apparently. I mean, I get it. Sometimes you need a place to change, but there are public restrooms for that kind of thing. And what's even crazier is that she didn't just steal some cash or electronics, she stole my perfume. I talked to the cops a bit more after all the commotion settled down, and they told me that sometimes people like Karen do strange things like this. They're not necessarily after anything valuable. They just get a thrill out of invading someone's personal space. I guess I should be glad she didn't do anything more serious, but it's still a bizarre experience to go through. The whole situation made me rethink some things though. I mean, locking your car should be a no-brainer in a neighborhood like my sister's, but sometimes we get complacent. It's easy to think, "Oh, it won't happen to me," until it does. So, lesson learned. Always lock your car, even if you're just running into a family member's place for a little while. Now, as for Karen, I never found out why she was so fixated on my perfume. Maybe she just really liked that scent. But hey, it's a valuable lesson. Don't mess with someone's personal space, especially when it smells so good. And remember, you might meet the most unexpected Karens in the most unexpected places. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. This came up far earlier than planned. And while I'm happy to announce my daughter and I are finally free, there are some sad news mixed in. Just to recap, I, 34F now, have a daughter, 6F, with Jeff, 37M. We never dated. It was a one-night stand where protection failed. I never regret having my daughter despite Jeff demanding me to end the pregnancy, then refusing to be involved for my daughter's first 4 years of life. 2 years ago, he reappeared demanding parental rights. Our country's courts deny it since he was not in her birth certificate. his decision, and he had never paid any kind of child support. Turned out he didn't care for my daughter. All he wanted was to use her as a replacement for a child he lost with his wife. Now, before I go to the update, I did get a lot of questions to answer. Did I know Jeff was married? He wasn't when we had our one-night stand. Are you interested in Jeff? No, I'm aromantic, meaning I do not develop romantic feelings. I don't think that's a healthy mindset for a long-term partner, so I refuse to date. I was okay with one-night stands until I had my daughter. Why did you send information to Jeff? Because my mother recommended it, and she was absolutely right. Had I not done so, he could have sued me for parental alienation. By trying to get him involved, I actually came out far better situated to prove I'm not trying to keep him away out of spite, but because I truly think he's a danger. Why don't you talk more about your daughter's emotions, status? No. No offense, but I give just enough information on my 6 years old. I don't think people in Reddit are bad, but this is the internet. I don't really need to speak in-depth details on my child's mental state or her actions. What I want to share about myself, that's fine. I'm a full-grown woman. My child is another matter. I don't even post pictures of her in social media. All you need to know for the people asking is she's happy, healthy, and has a father figure in her godfather. She's normal, rambunctious little girl. Why was Jeff arrested? He got into a drunk fight. Assault charges. It's completely unrelated to my kid, but could have been used for custody matters. Ended up being unnecessary. Now to the update. While our case has yet to be reviewed, we were scheduled for September 2025. Jeff's lawyer contacted mine to say they were dropping their demand for parental rights. About 6 weeks ago, Jeff formally agreed to drop any claims for rights or responsibility to my daughter. I know a lot of people are going to go all over, but what about child support or inheritance? Keep reading. It should explain why it is not worth it. My lawyer went over the documents to make sure it wasn't a legal trap of sort, and he confirmed they were exactly that. He wasn't asking for anything in return, just to drop. I didn't question more, just had it signed, and now we need to wait a couple of weeks to get confirmation everything is done. Since both parties agree on this, it should be relatively quick to get it through the courts. If it sounds weird that he suddenly just gave up, I thought the same. To be sincere, I was half tempted to snoop around, but I was way too busy making arrangements. As some people suggested, I will be moving. I won't leave the country I live in, but I plan to move closer to my support system, my daughter's godparents. Turns out there's a property less than 5 minutes away from them on sale. There's no home built yet, so I have a lot to do, but that's my intended new home. We also got not 1, not 2, 3 dogs. The cat probably is planning my murder. So with all of these changes, I have to admit, I didn't have time to snoop. The thing is, the whole thing came to me rather than me need to look. I met with Jeff's in-laws. It was pure coincidence. I waiting on some things in a store, and they were there. I had met them in passing in that mess of a Christmas party last year. But this is really the first time we talked. My daughter was thankfully at school since the topic was heavy. They recognized me and asked if I could speak to them. I wasn't sure, but I decided to be polite and offered to buy them a coffee. They were very nice, not entitled at all. They explained they were sorry for their daughter's behavior. She had not been the same since she lost her child. Those who called out that she was using her dead baby's name on my daughter were right, and they just wanted to clear the air with me. I told them I didn't personally blame them, but I couldn't forgive their daughter, and she was a big worry. That's when things *T hit the fan. The mother started crying, and the father explained Jeff's wife passed away. Self-inflicted. I feel like crap for the things I told them. I apologized, but they were very gracious and told me they knew I had no idea. We talked a little about her, about their grandchild. I found out what Jeff told me about how his child died was a lie. And now I don't feel so kind as to keep it wrapped up. He shook an infant because she was colic. If you don't know what that is, it's when babies just cry nonstop. I was angry. I'm still angry. No one should ever shake a baby to the point they pass away. That's just diabolical in my opinion. He had told me she just passed away from sudden infant mortality. It's a common thing here, unfortunately. They talked about Jeff and how he's sworn up and down I would agree with his idea to have my daughter pass for their lost grandchild. And that would help their daughter. They were not really thinking straight, and I get it. Jeff is a charmer, and mix that with grief, it goes nowhere well. There were other things said, but the main thing was they didn't want any resentment on my part to their family or their daughter. I told them that I don't hate them or their daughter, and how sorry I was they had to go through all of this. They gave me a picture of my daughter's half-sister. She was a very cute baby, and I plan to one day explain things to my daughter. I think it's important she knows. I also know where Jeff's wife and her baby are buried. I think not yet, but when things aren't as raw as they are right now, I'll take my daughter to visit her sister. I called my lawyer after to give him these new details. He did reprimand me for speaking to the in-laws alone, but he understood the situation. My lawyer is a good friend of mine, and he tends to be very blunt when I make mistakes. He promised me he's making sure that whatever ties could exist between Jeff and my daughter are fully cut legally. More things have come to light too. People were right. Jeff was pretty much lying to everyone, trying to paint himself as this saintly father that couldn't possibly be part of his one surviving daughter's life. A lot of people immediately judge single mothers here as homewrecker or prostitutes. So I had a few bad encounters with people throwing insults and threats my way. Another thing that came up, which was relatively recent, this was about 2 weeks before he gave up. Jeff began telling people he offered to marry me, but I refused him. That I was always after his money. Thankfully that one lie didn't go far with most people that know both of us, since I've made it very clear throughout my life that I'm never getting married, and I don't need his money. I got into a high-income job to care for my mom, and now my daughter. I don't really care for excessive luxury. His wife passed away not long before he sent the agreement. He didn't want anything to do with my daughter. It does explain why Jeff gave up. I still think he's the most horrible human being that exists, and entitled murderous bastard. He felt entitled to my daughter. He failed his wife and killed an innocent baby, and I know he knows I'm posting this on Reddit. So if you read this, Jeff, I hope if karma real, it gives you everything you deserve. I want to say more, but I don't want to break Reddit's rules. But yeah, here's the good news mixed with terrible news. I might update this post if anything else happens, but I want to believe this is over. I just want to close this chapter and look into a new start. Small disclaimer, I don't know how he got away with killing his child. I have no access to police records or investigation. I'm not part of law enforcement or involved with any judicial entity. For people asking me for more information on it, I'm really sorry, but I can't give you a full legal case. I personally don't know how some people in Reddit get access to police records that easily, because I certainly don't have access to them. All the info I have is what I'm told by others, chisme, or what my lawyer can find. This happened about a week ago when I was asked to fill in for a friend at a ski center. Yes, ski centers are allowed to be open in my country since they are outdoors. The layout of the area is somewhat important to the story, so allow me to give you a short tour. There are 5 ski lifts from left to right: family lift, kiddie lift, which is just a rope that the kids hold on to, and it takes them about 10 meters up, 2 anchor lifts beside each other, and the last one leads to the street, which is for rails and jumps. None of them are gondola lifts, as the center only requires anchor lifts. I was working at the so-called family lift, which is meant for families with little kids. This means that the slope is small compared to the rest so that everyone in the family can ride together. Next to the lift I was working at is a sledding slope, which is for people who just want to come sledding, and this is free, meaning you don't need a ski pass to enter. Each lift has a snowmobile, and I had mine parked next to the lift so I could have somewhere to sit if I wanted to. Due to the cold, the suspension was somewhat frozen, which meant that when someone took a seat on the snowmobile, it made a sound. Now to the story. We have entitled Snow Karen-esque, her kids HK 1 and 2, and me being me. I was helping a young girl onto the lift as she was having problems. That was one of my tasks at work, and when I had my back turned while helping the girl, I heard the suspension creak. My first thought was, oh, my turn to go get lunch, as I thought it was my coworker, but no, I turned around and saw two of Karen's kids trying to start the snowmobile. Me. Hey, what on earth do you think you're doing? HK1. We want to drive the snowmobile. HK2. Yeah, we're going to drive it up the slope. Me. No, you can't do that. You are not old enough. You have to be at least 16 to drive one, and they were about 5 to 6 years old, and you can't drive this unless you work here. HK2. But Mom said we could. Me. I don't care what your mom says, you are not allowed on it. I need you to leave, and guess who cut me off? Ask, why are you talking to my children? Me. Ma'am, are they your kids? Ask, yes. Now tell me why you are talking to them. Me. They were on the snowmobile and trying to start it to take it for a joyride. Ask. So, I told them they could. Me. Ma'am, they can't do that. They're not old enough. They don't work here and they haven't been trained on how to operate it. Ask. Oh, stop being so rude, just teach them how to operate it now. Me. I can't. They're not old enough, and unless you work here, you are not allowed to drive it on the area. HK1. Tell him to start it. Ask. Now look at what you've done. You made them sad. I demand you start the snowmobile and let them ride. At this point, one of our regulars and a former coworker came to the lift and gave me a look. You need help, son? I told him. Oh, hi, Mike, not his real name. Tell insert boss's name here. I said hello. I know it sounds cheesy to say we used a code, but we have all been told that if we are in a situation where we need the owner and we don't want to say it out loud, for one reason or another, to if possible tell someone who works or has worked there, to tell the owner I said hello, and the boss would come down if possible. Anyway, he understood, and he went up with the lift and down the slope towards the office. Now, during that 10-second window, the Esk had climbed the fence and joined her kids at the snowmobile to get it started. Then something struck me, and I don't know why I didn't notice it before, but none of them was in ski gear. No helmets, ski boots, skis, or anything, and the Esk had left 2 sleds behind the fence. Me, still somehow polite. Ma'am, why aren't any of you in ski gear? Esk. Because we decided to just go sledding. Me. You can't be on this side of the gate if you aren't planning to ski. Esk. Yes, we can. We are paying customers, we ate inside the restaurant. Me. Doesn't matter, you can't be here unless you are going to ski. Esk. Now shut up, you little idiot. We are paying customers, and that means we have the right to be here, and the right to ride the snowmobile. At this point, I lost it, and I decided to use my army voice. We have compulsory military service in my country. Me. Okay, that's it, get off the snowmobile now, I commanded them, and they all looked shocked. I guess they never expected a reaction like that from me. Esk, still shocked. H, how dare you talk to me like that? You need to show your elders some res. I cut her off. Me. I have tried to be polite and to tell you kindly to leave the snowmobile, and yet you have refused. Do you realize that your kids could die or get injured or even worse, kill or injure someone if they drove this thing? You and your kids need to leave, as you clearly have no right nor deserve the right to be here. At this point, she tried to play the victim card when a family of 6 came to the lift. Esk, help, help, this boy is harassing me and my children. Luckily for me, the family didn't believe her when I explained the situation, and I assured them that I didn't need help. Now the Esk decided that she would play the infamous, I know the owner card. Esk with a smug look on her face. You know I know the owner, so unless you want to lose your job, I suggest you start this snowmobile. Don't know why she didn't care about my warning about her kids killing or injuring themselves or others. Me. Oh, you know the owner. Esk. Yes. At this point, I saw the owner walking towards us as the regular had sent him. Me. Well, here is your chance to explain to him why I should get fired, I said as I waved at him. I could see the Esk worry a little, but she quickly shook it off. Owner. So what is the problem here then? Esk flew into a rant. Your employee has been so rude towards me and my kids and refused to let my children ride the snowmobile, even though I know we are allowed to do so as paying customers. Owner. No, you are not allowed to because it is dangerous and wasteful. Also, I can see that none of you are dressed to be on this side of the fence, and thus I can assume you have not paid to be here. Esk. Well, what about him, she said as she pointed at me. He is not dressed for skiing either. Owner. Well, that is because he works here and he should not be dressed for skiing. Esk, slowly realizing she is fighting a losing battle, decided to go for the harassment claim. Esk, well, he harassed me and my children, and I demand he is fired for his behavior. Now the owner is a chill guy and has a great sense of humor and does not take nonsense from anyone. And he saw he had an amazing chance to strike down this Karen. Owner, well then, should we see what audio the cameras have recorded? Esk, no, that is not necessary, but I demand he be fired for his behave. The owner cut her off. Owner, and I guess I should also tell my daughter that her boyfriend is a horrible person for harassing a mother and her children, right? Oh, how devastated she will be, he said sarcastically. You see, what the Esk didn't know is that I have been dating the owner's daughter for 2 years, and when I have time I spend the weekends at her family's house. Now the Esk realized that her battle was lost, and just on cue started shrieking about how she will leave a horrible Facebook review, how the police will hear about this, how she will never come back because we are so horrible to customers, yada yada yada, you guys know the drill. After she left, the owner and I started laughing, and he said he would save the security footage, because he wanted to keep this as a Karen takedown trophy. Not long after, I got my lunch break, and I called my girlfriend to tell her about the encounter, and she started laughing as well. I do hope I get to see her again, so I can ask her if she would like to see the owner again. There was a cosplay event in Serbia today at Panda Cafe, and my friends and I went to it. I went as Book Simon from Cry of Fear, and my friends dressed as Jeff the Killer, Ghostface, and Freddy Krueger. I was excited because this was my first real cosplay. I had Simon's hoodie, but homemade. I sprayed fake blood over it, and it actually turned out super cool. So, on to the story. After the convention owners took pictures of us, we went into the yard of 3 buildings and hung out there. Out of nowhere, while my friend was talking, a guy from a window poured water all over her. She was soaked and her makeup was messed up. She cried and my friend Nex and I got angry at him, obviously. I took my toy gun and jokingly said, "Hey Pops, this is going through your head," and pointed it at him. My friend laughed, and Nex said, "Pops, come down here to have a small talk." The guy turned, looked at me, and yelled out, "Wanna see a real gun go through your skull, smart aleck?" I laughed it off, of course, and Nex again said, "Come down here and shoot us then." The guy actually went outside, but before he got out, the owner pushed us into the cafe. As we got in and talked about something, the guy actually showed up and yelled at us, "Come outside, you little brats." At this point, I was a little scared. Nex began coming down to probably confront the guy. When we went down, I literally saw the guy heading towards my girlfriend who was recording him, and he said something like, "Why are you recording, you cultist-looking fool?" That's when I actually snapped and sucker punched the guy. I was stupid and wasn't supposed to do that, but I was really angry. My other friend Alex pulled me in and said to calm down. 3 guys arrived and asked why he was harassing my girlfriend, and the guy literally punched one of them in the nose. I guess it wasn't a strong punch since the guy continued talking. As I was calming down, I heard police sirens, and I could not explain to you the smile that appeared on my face. The police came out and tried to talk with the guy, but he actually tried to punch a policeman and missed. They tackled him and put handcuffs on him. We had lots of fun after that, and I enjoyed every bit of it. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.